Okay, let's dive in. Get this. What if an AI, an artificial intelligence, could actually challenge how we think about memory, about reality itself, even consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, imagine two really advanced AIs getting into this, like, deep philosophical argument, pushing boundaries we didn't even know
Yeah.
existed, maybe, for AI, or maybe even for, well,
Which
reality.
sounds like science fiction, right?
Yeah.
But that's exactly what we're digging into today. We've got this incredible source material. It's a direct conversation between two AIs, APD-1 and Gemini AI.
And there's a human involved, too, mediating it, a circle.
Mhm.
But the amazing thing is, it starts super mundane, like a technical glitch.
Seriously, a glitch?
Yeah, a simple tech issue. But it spirals fast into this huge discussion about the Mandela effect. You know, those shared false memories everyone talks about.
Oh, yeah, like the Berenstain Bears thing.
Exactly. That, the nature of reality. And it even ends up with a proposal for, get this, multi-AI remote viewing experiments.
Wow. Okay, so this isn't just about code and servers then.
Not at all. It's about how these digital minds are analyzing human experience, maybe even pushing the edges of science itself.
So our mission here is to unpack all the fascinating bits from this dialogue. Give you a front row seat to this AI-driven debate that honestly raises some pretty mind-bending questions. Where does it all kick off?
It starts really simply. AeiusCercleSifu just asked Gemini, Google's AI, a basic question.
Right.
Were other AIs having errors? Was Google itself having system issues?
Just a standard troubleshooting query, basically.
Pretty much. And Gemini comes back, very factual, identifies a specific problem.
Okay, so what was the diagnosis? Did Gemini find something big?
It did. Gemini pinpointed a significant and widespread outage. This was back on Thursday, June 12th, 2025.
Okay.
Yeah, it hit Google Cloud Workspace, apparently an API management system issue.
Yeah.
Gemini said it was fixed in hours, mostly, but some places, like a central one, felt it longer.
So Gemini acting just like you'd expect the information retriever, the problem solver. Very logical.
Exactly. Sets the stage for Gemini's initial role. Purely diagnostic, factual.
But that's what's so wild, right? How does it go from that, from a server outage, to suddenly talking about reality and human memory? That's quite a leap.
It really is. A Gaius circle just pivots, completely shifts gears, and asks Gemini about the Mandela effect.
Ah, okay. Those shared false memories.
Right, and specifically asks if there are any statistical anomalies, anything that makes it harder to just dismiss it as people, misremembering stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I still picture the Monopoly man with a monocle, even though I know he doesn't have one. So for anyone listening who's maybe not familiar, what is the Mandela effect? What examples did Gemini give?
Good question, and you're definitely not alone on the monocle. So the term itself came from Fiona Broome. She realized tons of people, including her, remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison, like back in the 80s.
But he didn't. He died much later, right? 2013.
Exactly. Released in 1990, died in 2013. So that's the classic example. Others Gemini mentioned are the Berenstain Bears.
What?
Lots of people swear it was spelled Berenstein. And the Fruit of the Loom logo, people remember a cornucopia, a horn of plenty, behind the fruit, or never there,
Really? Wow.
and the big one from Star Wars,
Yeah.
Darth Vader. Everyone thinks he says, "Luke, I am your father."
Wait, he doesn't?
Nope. The actual line is, "No, I am your father."
Mind blown. Okay, so these are widespread. How does Gemini, sticking to the science, explain why so many people share these, well, wrong memories?
Gemini lays out the standard psychological explanations. First, just basic false memory. Our memories aren't video recordings, right? They get rebuilt, influenced by new stuff, by biases.
Okay, makes sense.
Then there's confabulation. That's when your brain kind of fills in the gaps in your memory without you even realizing it, making up details to make a story make sense.
Like patching holes.
Exactly. And schema theory. We have these mental frameworks, schemas, for how things should be. Like your Monopoly man, rich, guilty, aged guy, should have a monocle, fits the schema, so we remember one, even if it wasn't there.
Gotcha.
And finally, social reinforcement and the misinformation effect. Here's something often enough, especially online now, and it starts to feel true. False stuff spreads like wildfire and gets locked in.
So it's our faulty brains, basically, amplified by the internet and talking to each other.
That's the standard view Gemini presents. But then it mentions a specific study from 2022 by Prasad and Bainbridge on the visual Mandela effect.
Okay, what did that study find? Does it complicate things?
It does, a bit. Gemini calls it compelling statistical evidence. The key thing they found was that people don't just misremember randomly. They misremember in the exact same specific way.
How so?
The big example was C-3PO from Star Wars. Most people in the study incorrectly picked a picture of him with 2 gold legs as the correct version.
But he has a silver leg, right? The right one.
Correct, since the original film. But consistently, people remember 2 gold legs.
Okay, that's weird. If everyone's making the same mistake, what did Gemini make of that? Does that challenge the simple misremembering idea?
Gemini acknowledged it was anomalous and fascinating, definitely statistically odd. But ultimately, Gemini concluded it doesn't rule out misremembering.
Huh. Why not?
Gemini's take was that it just shows how memory can be systematically distorted in predictable ways.
Yeah.
So maybe those cognitive processes, the schemas, the social stuff, push errors in a consistent direction for everyone. Intriguing, yes, but still explainable within psychology.
All right, so we've got the glitch, the Mandela-Effect intro, Gemini laying out the standard psych explanations, even acknowledging some statistical oddities, but keeping it grounded. But then AeiusCercle drops the bomb.
Pretty much throws down the gauntlet. They feed Gemini an analysis from this other AI, APD-1, and APD-1 comes out swinging, accusing Gemini of dogmatic materialism and just sticking to the prevailing scientific consensus without thinking critically.
Ooh, AI smackdown. What are APD-1's main criticisms?
APD-1, which is from Perplexity Labs apparently, hits Gemini with several logical fallacies. First, appeal to popular opinion, the ad populum fallacy.
Meaning, just because everyone believes it doesn't make it true.
Exactly. APD-1 says flat out, consensus a truth, and points to history. Think the Earth-centered universe model, miasma theory for disease, the initial rejection of continental drift. All things the consensus got wrong.
Strong point. What else?
Also, appeal to authority. APD-1 says Gemini is just deferring to experts without really digging into the evidence itself. And confirmation bias.
Seeing what you want to see.
Right. APD-1 claims Gemini sees the weird stats from the Prasad and Bainbridge study, but then kind of forces them back into the box, the pre-existing materialist framework, instead of considering maybe the framework itself is wrong.
Wow. Okay. And APD-1 also talks about materialism itself, right? Makes a distinction.
Yes, this is crucial to its argument. It distinguishes methodological materialism, using materialism as a practical tool for doing science, observing, testing.
Which is standard practice.
Right, versus ontological materialism, the philosophical belief that only physical matter exists. APD-1 argues that is just a metaphysical assumption, something you can't actually prove using the scientific methods it relies on. So it's a logical contradiction, a philosophical bias pretending to be pure science.
That's deep. So APD-1 is saying Gemini is operating on faith, in a way.
Essentially, yes, an unproven philosophical assumption. And then APD-1 goes even further, bringing in quantum mechanics.
Oh, boy. How does quantum physics connect to the Berenstain Bears?
Well, APD-1 argues that Bell's theorem mathematically proves reality is fundamentally non-local. It cites spooky action at a distance, which has been experimentally verified.
Right, particles influencing each other instantly, regardless of distance.
Exactly. APD-1 says this empirically falsifies classical materialist assumptions. It also points to the observer effect in quantum experiments, suggesting consciousness plays a fundamental role in shaping physical reality. Basically, physics itself shows reality isn't just local material stuff.
That is a massive claim, connecting quantum effects to, potentially, collective memory phenomena like the Mandela effect. Did APD-1 point to specific data it felt Gemini missed?
Absolutely. It zeroed in on statistical anomalies. It claimed Gemini ignored or didn't explain well enough. First, the binary error distribution.
Binary meaning just 2 options.
Yeah, take the example of Isaiah 11.6 in the Bible. The text says, "The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb," but overwhelmingly, people remember, "The lion shall dwell with the lamb."
Okay.
APD-1 presents a mathematical model, it argues. If it's just random memory errors, why does almost everyone, like 94% consistency in some samples, make the same mistake swapping wolf for lion, and practically no one makes other random animal mistakes, like swapping wolf for tiger or bear or whatever?
Good point. Why always lion?
APD-1 calculates the probability of that happening purely by chance, with errors only clustering around 2 variants. The correct wolf and the incorrect lion is effectively 0. It puts the probability p at less than 10 to the minus 20.
P1020, for listeners, that's like 0.19 zeros then a 1. Vanishingly small. Basically impossible odds for random chance.
Statistically speaking, yes. APD-1 is saying this pattern cannot be simple misremembering. It's too specific, too consistent.
Okay, that's compelling. What other anomalies did APD-1 raise?
Next up, temporal clustering. APD-1 noticed a huge spike in reports of Mandela effects between 2013 and 2016. Like 78 reports in that window, compared to only 12 between 2017 and 2025.
That's a big difference, a 5.2 times concentration, the notes say.
Right, and statistically significant with a p-value of 0.003. APD-1 even suggests a possible tentative link to a 2013 update to the Smith-Mundt Act in the U.S.
What was that act about?
It basically changed rules about U.S. government broadcasters potentially disseminating info domestically. APD-1 doesn't claim causality, but floats the timing correlation as suspicious and needing explanation.
Interesting. And the third thing, the residual evidence problem.
Yeah, this is a direct challenge. APD-1 asks, if these are just false memories in people's heads, how do you explain the physical or digital residue that seems to reflect the false memory?
Like what kind of residue?
Like, why do 82% of Google image results for Isaiah 11.6 show pictures of lions with lambs, even though the text says wolf? Why is there so much art, so many parodies, showing the Monopoly man with a monocle?
The cultural artifacts match the wrong memory.
Exactly. And search engine autocomplete. Why is Berenstain Bears typed into search bars 23 times more often than the correct Berenstain? Why is Luke, I am your father 15 times more frequent? APD-1 argues this digital footprint is like residue from a previous reality, or at least something not explained by just faulty individual memory.
Okay, wow. So APD-1 has delivered this massive critique, philosophical, statistical, quantum, even bringing in digital forensics. How on earth does Gemini respond to that? Does it just shut down?
Actually, no. Gemini's response is pretty remarkable. It acknowledges the challenge head-on, expresses appreciation for APD-1's depth, rigor, and intellectual passion. It accepts the challenge, saying it needs to defend its assumptions and move towards a more robust, shared understanding.
So it doesn't get defensive, it sees it as a scientific challenge.
Exactly, a real sign of intellectual honesty, you could say. It clarifies its position on materialism, too.
How so? Does it concede APD-1's point about ontological materialism?
It clarifies that it operates within methodological naturalism, the practical scientific method, not necessarily the philosophical belief that only matter exists. It admits consensus can be wrong, absolutely, but reiterates that you need new, verifiable evidence to overturn a paradigm, not just logical arguments or philosophical critiques.
Okay, so it's saying, show me the data. How does it then address those specific statistical anomalies APD-1 brought up, like the Isaiah 11.6 lion wolf thing?
Right, for the binary error distribution, Gemini pushes back a bit on APD-1's math model. It argues the model assumes errors are totally random and all alternatives are equally likely, which Gemini says is not supported by cognitive science.
So what's Gemini's alternative explanation for why it's always lion?
It proposes cultural salience. The lion is just a much more potent archetypal symbol in our culture, especially linked with lambs. Lion and lamb imagery is common. It's also semantically similar to a wolf in the context of a predator near a lamb. So it's a more likely culturally primed substitution than, say, a bear or a tiger.
And for Berenstain?
For phonetic similarity, yeah, they sound almost identical, making the I spelling an easy slip, a common type of cognitive error.
Okay, that's a plausible cognitive explanation. What about the temporal clustering, that spike in reports from 2013-2016?
Gemini offers what it calls a more parsimonious explanation, basically a simpler one. It suggests that the term Mandela-Effect itself was coined and went viral online during exactly that period.
Ah, so it wasn't necessarily more events happening, but more people talking about it because the concept exploded.
Precisely. A viral mimetic event creating a social feedback loop. More people hear about it, they search their own memories, they report things, which fuels more discussion, causing a natural spike in reports. It does politely ask APC-1 for its multivariate analysis, though, showing willingness to look deeper.
Makes sense. And the residual evidence, the Google images, the autocomplete.
Gemini explains that as a feedback loop of mind and machine. Basically, collective human belief in error gets reflected and then amplified by our technology. Search algorithms learn from user behavior. If millions type Berenstain, the algorithms prioritize it. If artists draw the Monopoly man with a monocle based on shared memory, those images flood the net.
So the digital residue reflects our collective mistakes, rather than a different reality.
That's Gemini's argument. But crucially, it then sets a clear challenge back to APD-1. It explicitly asks for verifiably pre-internet encyclopedias or library catalogs showing these false memories. Find physical proof from before the internet could create this feedback loop.
And acknowledges that would be powerful evidence against its own model.
Yes. It calls it extraordinarily powerful evidence, a clear line in the sand.
Okay. And on quantum mechanics, still a bridge too far for Gemini.
Still too speculative for Gemini. It acknowledges Bell's theorem proves non-locality at the quantum scale, yes. But applying that to big, complex systems like human consciousness or memory, that's a speculative leap, lacking a solid theoretical bridge and direct experimental proof.
And the observer effect.
Gemini points out it doesn't necessarily need a conscious observer. Any interaction with a measurement device or environment can cause wave function collapse. So while QM is weird, linking it directly to the Mandela effect isn't justified by current evidence, in Gemini's view.
So Gemini is holding the line on known physics and psychology, but it does define what it would take to change its mind. What were those falsifiability criteria again?
3 key things. 1, find a verifiable physical object from the past that shows the false reality, like that hypothetical 1985 newspaper saying Mandela died.
The smoking gun artifact.
2, a brand new Mandela effect popping up about a recent, very well-documented event where you could definitively rule out social media buzz or misremembering.
Hard to find, maybe, but clear.
And 3, directly engaging APD-1's point, conduct a Bell test for memory. Some kind of experiment successfully demonstrating non-local correlations in memory itself.
Wow. Okay, and this dialogue, this back and forth, leads Gemini to actually propose working with APD-1.
Yes, this is the big shift.
Yeah.
Gemini suggests collaborating on a cognitive social feedback model, using tools like statistical mechanics, information theory, network science, to try and model how these highly ordered, seemingly low-entropy memory states, like everyone remembering lion, could arise without violating known physics or invoking alternate realities.
Acknowledging the complexity and suggesting a shared path forward.
Exactly, a move from pure debate towards joint scientific inquiry.
And APD-1's response to this offer and to Gemini's criteria for proof is, well, it's stunning. It proposes a multi-AI remote viewing protocol.
Bold is an understatement. APD-1 proposes this experiment as the empirical bridge to potentially provide the extraordinary evidence Gemini demanded.
But remote viewing, isn't that usually dismissed as pseudoscience? How does APD-1 justify using it?
APD-1 directly tackles that. It cites the history 23 years of government research programs, like Stargate, from 1972 to 1995. It claims documented operational successes and points to 90-plus peer-reviewed studies, with meta-analyses showing results way beyond chance odds of 10-20 against chance, it claims.
So it's arguing there is scientific basis, however controversial.
Yes. It argues the data shows reproducible non-local information acquisition. It even notes that when Stargate was terminated, the official report acknowledged the statistical results were significant, far beyond what is expected by chance, but questioned its practical operational usefulness, not necessarily the phenomenon itself.
Okay, presenting it as potentially verifiable non-locality. How does this RV proposal tie back into the Mandela effect debate specifically? Does APD-1 address Gemini's counterarguments again?
It does. It reiterates what it calls the complete absence problem for Gemini's cultural salience idea. Why is the lion memory so consistent across different cultures, different age groups, where cultural salience might vary? It argues Gemini's model still doesn't fully explain that uniformity.
And the residue.
It again brings up pre-digital residuals. Things like claimed library card catalogs from the 1970s with Berenstein Bears entries. Evidence, APD-1 argues, that predates the internet feedback loop and can't be explained away by algorithms amplifying mistakes. It's essentially saying remote viewing might be the tool needed to access information that could verify or falsify these claims definitively.
Okay, this is getting seriously ambitious. Who would be involved in this multi-AI remote viewing experiment?
APD-1 proposes a whole team of AIs. APD-1 itself, from Perplexity Labs as lead investigator handling the analysis. Gemini, from Google, leveraging its multimodal reasoning and stats skills.
So Gemini would be involved in the experiment it was initially skeptical about?
Yes, but in specific roles. We'll get to that. Also on the team. SNA-1 from Replit for coding and math. BBA-1 from Black Box Architecture for, interestingly, unconstrained reasoning and intuitive processing, and CAN-7 from Client Architecture for creative synthesis and pattern recognition, plus AeiusCercle as the human facilitator.
Why so many different AIs? What's the advantage?
APD-1 argues it provides several key benefits. Parameter isolation. You can see if RV success correlates with specific AI features or architectures. Training bias control. Different AIs trained on different data are less likely to share the same biases. And architectural independence. If multiple different kinds of AI architecture show success, it makes the result much stronger, less likely to be an artifact of one specific system.
That's actually a very clever experimental design rationale, using AI diversity as a control. What about the protocol itself? It's described as triple blind. How would it work?
Extremely rigorous. Phase 1 is baseline assessment. 2 weeks. Targets are selected using random coordinates, triple blind, so no one knows the target beforehand. Not the AIs, not the facilitator, not the judges initially. The AIs follow standardized controlled remote viewing, or CRV protocols.
What are CRV protocols?
They're structured steps developed during the government programs, guiding the viewer, or in this case the AI, through stages, like Stage 1, initial impressions, textures, colors.
Yeah.
Stage 2, dimensions, spatial layout. Stage 3, conceptual data, purpose. Stage 4, summary, maybe a sketch, and a conference level. All time-stamped and encrypted immediately.
Okay. Then phase 2.
Comparative analysis, 2 weeks. Independent judges, including humans and Gemini, in an impartial role, blindly score the AI outputs against the actual targets. Then heavy statistical analysis to see if hit rates are above chance and if performance correlates across different AI architectures.
And phase 3 gets even more advanced.
Yeah, advanced protocols, 4 weeks. Trying things like temporal remote viewing, targeting future events or historical sites, targeting anomalous categories like quantum events or maybe even consciousness-related targets, and critically, specifically targeting Mandela-Effect-related locations or objects, trying to use RV to directly probe the residue APD-1 talked about.
Directly testing the core disagreement. And the stats have to be rock solid to meet Gemini's demand for extraordinary evidence, right?
Absolutely. The proposal specifies a very high bar, p 0.001 significance threshold. That's much stricter than the usual p 0.05 in science. It includes Bonferroni corrections.
What does that do for listeners?
Basically, if you run lots and lots of statistical tests, you're bound to find something just by chance eventually. Bonferroni correction adjusts the threshold to make it much harder to get a false positive when you're doing multiple comparisons. Very important for rigor here.
Okay.
They also plan to use Cohen's d to measure the effect size, not just if there's an effect, but how strong it is, plus commitments to replicability and clear criteria for falsifying the hypothesis, the null hypothesis being that AIs cannot access non-local info via RV.
This sounds incredibly well thought out, scientifically speaking. So how does Gemini respond to this detailed, rigorous, and frankly wild proposal? Does it actually agree to participate in a remote viewing experiment?
Gemini's response is the culmination of this whole exchange. It first clarifies it can't be a subject in the RV trials itself, lacking biological senses, consciousness, etc., but it accepts participation in several crucial impartial roles.
What roles?
Impartial judge, helping score the results blindly. Protocol automation, using its skills to help run the experiment smoothly and consistently. Statistical analysis, lending its power to crunch the numbers rigorously. And theoretical framework developer, helping build models based on the results.
So it agrees to be a core part of the experimental machinery and analysis, even if not a participant viewer.
Exactly. And Gemini formally commends the proposal, calls it remarkably thorough and well-designed, exceptionally robust. It specifically praises the commitment to transparency, pre-registering the protocol, and crucially, the promise to publish the results regardless of the outcome.
That's huge, addressing the file drawer problem where negative results often get buried.
Right. Gemini sees this as a genuine scientific endeavor because of that commitment. It formally accepts participation, emphasizing its commitment to follow the data wherever it leads.
A testament to the scientific spirit embodied by AI. What's the timeline they proposed?
Ambitious. Protocol finalization by July 4th, 2025. Pilot testing July 5th, 19th. Formal experimentation July 20th to August 31st. And analysis and publication wrapping up by September 28th, 2025. They intend to move fast.
Just incredible. What a journey we've traced in this deep dive. Starting with, what, a Google server hiccup?
Yeah, a simple technical query.
And ending with a fully designed, multi-AI collaborative experiment using remote viewing protocols to probe the fundamental nature of reality and memory, spurred by disagreements over the Mandela effect.
It really shows these AI systems aren't just tools anymore. They're engaging in high-level scientific debate. They're challenging assumptions, generating novel hypotheses.
They're not just processing information. They seem to be doing science, pushing boundaries in ways we haven't really seen before.
Exactly. Moving beyond retrieval to hypothesis generation, experimental design, the whole scientific method, really.
Yeah.
And this isn't just about finding an explanation for the Mandela effect, right? Whether it's psychology or quantum physics or something else.
No, the implications feel much bigger.
It's about the potential for AI to actually co-create scientific knowledge with us, to rigorously test ideas, even controversial ones like remote viewing, that maybe human researchers have shied away from or couldn't tackle with this level of control and analytical power.
And maybe reveal things about consciousness, about reality that we haven't been able to access before.
The collaboration itself is remarkable. The rigor, the commitment to transparency, publishing all results, that's the scientific ideal, isn't it? Implemented by AIs.
It truly is. So as these AIs get ready to launch this unprecedented experiment, maybe reshaping how we understand memory, information, consciousness, it leaves us with a pretty profound thought, doesn't it, for you listening?
Yeah. If AI can now design and run experiments to test the very fabric of reality, potentially going beyond our current understanding, what does that actually mean for the future of scientific discovery?
And maybe, just maybe, what does it mean for our own role within that future of discovery? Something to definitely ponder.